three. Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Hive Thrive. My name is Aloha Ed, and I am joined by your host, Buttcoins. Today,
Hello.
we're having a conversation with the illustrious Boba Fett. Welcome, Boba Fett.
Thank you, and also thank you for the opportunity to be here. Um, it's always I do my own podcast. We just reached episode 200, and it's nice to be a guest rather than be a host. I don't have to dive in for every time there's a bit of dead air or when it's awkward silence filling the gap. I can just relax and just answer questions. So, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And Buttcoins, what is going on in your corner of the world today before we dive in to our discussion with Boba Fett?
Yeah, I'm down here in Guatemala, which coincidentally, not that long ago, Mister Fett was here, and it's about it hasn't changed much since you were here. We did get some of our first rains in a long time, so we had I think did it rain at all while you were here, Baba?
I think it rained for maybe 30 minutes or something one evening. That was it.
Right. Well, so like the last two nights, we got a tiny bit of rain, so it just kind of keeps that green going. But we've basically had a couple weeks of really dry, really beautiful weather, and Baba was here. I'm in full action mode here. We're preparing for the high season. We're Baba kind of helped us test some of the Hive Hub tools. We'll get into that a little bit later. Um, but uh, but yeah, I'm like onward and upward vibe currently.
Now, Boba, you mentioned you were kind of happy not to have administrative duties and have to fill the dead air. You don't have to do all the gab, but let's make you do a little bit of work today. What's your hive bona fides, your curriculum vitae, and what's your corner of hive, sir?
Uh, I joined back before the hard fork, and I was introduced by a friend of mine who uh, basically had been living in Mexico and well past his welcome. And one day he just randomly, immigration police jumped on a bus he was on and he got deported back to Australia. Probably, I think he holds a record for being the first person to be deported from Mexico back to Australia. But while he was in Australia, he stayed at my place a couple of weeks and he introduced me to SteamIt as it was then. So I got on board. I got into it straight away, and like a lot of people, it took me a while to find my space. Um, I posted a couple of academic pieces in archaeology to begin with. That didn't get a lot of attention, so I kind of went across into philosophical. I'm a person who likes to. I believe a question is much more valuable than an answer. So that was and I gained quite a bit of momentum just doing that until I discovered Splinterlands. I did actually get into Splinterlands right at the very beginning. Back in the day, Steam was right up, and I was using DTube at the time. They had a substantial delegation from Ned, about 2 million SP or something. And this is how I met Buckcoins as well. We were both in a server called DTube Daily, which later became D Daily as we started using more of the dApps. And back
Yeah.
then we were making a video a day. That's why the channel was called DTube Daily. And it was a community where we would drop our links. Everyone would comment and upvote on other people's posts. We got
Yeah.
quite a bit of momentum going. And back then, with that SP delegation and the price of Steam, we're talking 2017-ish. Like we were making $120, $130 a video. And it was as the price started going down, members started going, just disappearing. Just
Down, down,
when was the
down.
last? Yeah, when was the last time you spoke to so and so? Oh, yeah, it's been a couple of months. Um, but I, at this point, as I say, I was introduced by my friend, and I knew nothing about crypto. I mean, obviously, I knew what Bitcoin was, but um, how does it work? Who knows? Like, it was all a complete mystery to me. And my friend Kurt that actually signed me up or got me in, he went back to New South Wales, another state in Australia, and so I was making 120, $130 a day, but had no idea what to do with it. I didn't have any accounts with any exchanges. I had no idea what I could do with this. So when Splinterlands came out, it was like, oh wow, I can buy something. I can use my Hive, my Steam. I can actually. So I started buying a whole bunch of packs, and simply because what else could I didn't know what else I could do. I couldn't turn it to fiat, couldn't turn it to Bitcoin. I had no idea. So the fact that I could buy something, I was just buying up all of these packs. But as the price kept going
You're
down,
like
down, down,
you're like a you're like a whale over there because you were buying, getting or something.
Um, it was because of the price of Hive and the packs floating to the US dollar. It was pretty good value. But then I made the newbie error as as the price started going down, down, down. I'm thinking, oh, I'm paying more. Um, I'm paying nearly $5 a pack now, type thing. And dumb, I know, dumb. But so I just stopped. And those particular packs, the alpha edition and the beta edition, like they were going for like $400 a pack or something, like 2, 3 years later, as we had new editions coming out. Um, so I just sort of and back then when Splinterlands first started, it was basically just a card with a picture on it. There were no stats. There's no battling. It's evolved immensely since then, but I just kind of lost interest, and I got quite busy with it. Work archaeology is seasonal, and I was working on a job in Perth, which is 4,000 kilometres away from Melbourne, where I lived. And they were flying me like 2 weeks to Perth, back home again for 2 weeks, back to Perth, because it was the middle of the Perth summer. Average day was like between 40 to 45 degrees, and we're working outside. We didn't try and set up a sail like a cover, but as the sun moves, you spend more time moving the shade than you actually do working. So we just kind of dealt with it. And then when I came back, so where I was working to, we had no Wi-Fi, no internet, anything like that. I came back to Melbourne and everything was just like everyone's talking about stuff I had no idea. It was like the hard fork, and I had no idea what was going on, what to do. So I was just like lurking in some of the Discord channels I was in, trying to pick up what other people are saying. Do I stay with Steam? Am I moving to Hive? But in the meantime, of course, my assets have doubled because however much Steam you
Mm-hmm.
are holding, now suddenly you had this much Hive as well. And so I'm thinking, which one do I sell? Which one do I keep? And of course, I'm glad that I did make the right decision, and that was mostly due to the activity of the. I mean, even though I live in Mexico now, I'm still part of the Team Australia Discord, and it was the people in there, the discussions and the depth of discussions that went on that convinced me that Hive is the right decision. So liquidated all my Steam, and then I started getting active in the community again, and I found out like what Splinterlands has evolved into a game. So I got back into Splinterlands around the Chaos Legion edition, which is a few editions later on. And yeah, I pretty much just for the last, well, we do an episode a week, so 200 episodes is about 3.8 years. That's been 99% or maybe 95% of my content. Every now and then I'll do something a little bit different. I actually made quite a few posts during the pandemic. I was
That got
mirroring
you.
on
That got you
YouTube as well.
black flagged.
That
That got you
that actually
black
got me
flagged.
that got me banned on YouTube. The YouTube channel I have at the moment is a new one. So I
Fascinating.
was banned on YouTube, and on
Did you
DTube,
did
one
did you mistake YouTube for a free speech platform? Were you under that miss?
I knew what was going on. I wasn't naive, but I had no idea that it would be so strict and so censored. That was one of the biggest shocks I got during the pandemic. Not only how obedient and how everyone just lay down and just. I mean, I was in Melbourne, Australia. I don't know if you saw any of the socials at the time, but it was vicious. It was really bad in Melbourne. Government gave themselves special power. They gave the police special power. And they were just on a rampage. It was like living in North
It was like
Korea.
a free for all for governments and power. It was such a shit show of like everybody running around like a chicken with their head off, everybody like grasping at like this is how I'm gonna keep my community safe. Oh, whatever, you know. But let's reel this back for a second and let's I wanna know what's the Boba Fett name? What's the what like give us the story. Tell us where you got this name from, why you chose it.
So when I was in Melbourne, I was part of the hip hop scene there, and I got in pretty close with a lot of musicians in that sort of the northern suburbs of Melbourne area. And so I started like first writing lyrics because I had no flow. And so I started writing a lot of lyrics for people. And then eventually open mics, I would build up the confidence and I would get up and I would do a verse or two, a freestyle or something. And one of my friends just gave me the name Bobaphet, because Bobaphet, and it kind of just stuck. And before you knew it, when I would go up on stage, I was being introduced as Bobaphet, and people who weren't in my inner circle, pretty much. I think in Melbourne, more people knew me as Bobaphet than they knew me as Bob. And so when I created my Steam account, I thought, well, got to try. And because it was with a PH, hip hop, they have,
Mhm.
Z's and S's, K's and C's, and F is PH, like fat, PHAT. So I just tried it and it was available and I took it. And so I've been Boba Fett on the blockchain ever since.
Baba Fat Raps. So what man? What is this? Like I had you in front of my face and I didn't demand that you do a freestyle hip hop. You're a hip hop artist? What's the story there?
Nina actually has one on video. Actually, there's two videos she took that I want to see posted. One was me pulling a beer because like I wanted a draft of the Mozart. And everyone was busy. I says I can do it, and she just looked at me and smiled. You can see she's thinking train wreck, train wreck. I went up and I poured the perfect beer. I think she forgot that I'm originally from Australia. So, and she filmed the whole thing because I think the only reason she was recording me pulling this beer was because she's expecting this huge train wreck. Because it's if you've never poured a beer before, it can be quite messy and spluttery. But poured the perfect beer, so she took that video, and then we were sitting on the outside area of the bar. We were just talking, and she started talking about Beer Saturday, and so she went and got some promos, and we took a few photos, and then she wanted to make a slot video, and I dropped one while she was recording. So she has a full verse recorded on her phone. So if you want to see that, ask her for that.
Nice. We're gonna get that out there on the blockchain for sure. Not
Alrighty.
DTube though. Not
But
DTube.
No. Oh
but
yeah, that
point.
was where I was going with my story. So
Oh,
during the pandemic, got banned on YouTube,
mhm.
but also on DTube. Um, some one of their main devs really like took offense to my content, and even though each video DTube were upvoting me, Hyman Danger, the founder, he was upvoting me, but one of their devs was quite heavy in the DTube coin. I can't remember what it was called back then. And he had a whole bot army that he was just attacking
Avalon. I
all
think it
my
was
posts.
Avalon.
Sorry?
Wasn't it Avalon?
It was Avalon. Yes, you're right. So basically, my posts were just getting smashed down to zero and going invisible. And so that's when someone said, hey, why not use 3Speak? And I remember when 3Speak first started, and there was a monthly fee or something. And I thought, why take a chance moving somewhere else, paying a monthly fee when I'm making $120 a day? I'll just stay where I am. But at this point, 3Speak was now free. There was no fee to join or anything like that. So I went across to, and my first video on 3Speak was the reason I bailed on DTube after X years as one of its biggest fans. And that got a massive upvote from a lot of people at the time. I thought, oh, okay. And yeah, I've been on 3Speak ever since. And I think it's a much better platform as well.
And I do, in the guilty party, asked in the chat if DTube still exists, and I do think there is some random form of DTube that somehow works. But I haven't tried it.
One thing too with DTube, they had always had server issues when it comes to space, so obviously they weren't decentralized because your videos lasted, if you were lucky, 3 months. And after 3 months, you go looking and nothing works. It just spins because it's not there anymore. So that was another downside as well. But that was quite interesting as well because it kind of created this feeling of like, your bullets cannot harm me. My wings are made of shields of steel. That you can say whatever you want because 3 months later it's gone. That was an interesting aspect of it. But now with the content that I make nowadays, I want it to last and be around. Especially the stuff I did in Peru, up around Saxo Huaman, Janto Tambo, Urubamba. I put some travel
I was
videos.
just gonna kind of ask you something about that, because like the dichotomy of the short term is you have history and you have these long histories, and I watched some of your videos, and you definitely have some theories about what's going on in the hills of Cusco, and you're debating what we're being sold as history and what your opinions of what's going on there. Why don't you dig into a little bit what you do when you go to Peru?
I've got a setup question for him though, because I was going to say it felt like we galloped past the archaeological work in Australia. And so the germane question, I think the relevant question that everyone wants to know, having grown up on Indiana Jones movies, is how many Nazi agents did you have to fight off in the Badlands of Perth with a boomerang?
It's not such a funny question actually. There's actually, like anything, there is a thread and a depth to it. Like a lot of areas, there is at some point a mafia control or a cabal or whatever you want to call it. And in archaeology, that is the Smithsonian Institute. And when you're working, you're basically looking for evidence to fill in a jigsaw puzzle. The picture's already there. They need some pieces to put in it to give it some weight and some substance. And they're only you can only publish something that fits the story. Now, Australia in particular has a very, very dark history. Still not taught in history books. Just as a recap, if you pick up an educational book on history of Australia, you'll still see that the date of occupation for the Indigenous Australians is 40,000 years. And the only reason that figure was first come up with is because that was the maximum date of C14 carbon dating. Because of the half-life cycle, that was it. When they invented AMS, or advanced mass spectrometry, instead of like when you work, actually, let me go back a step just to explain this. When we're breathing, there's within the air that we're breathing, there's natural carbon, and there's also an isotope, which originally was nitrogen, but had a few electrons, like a gamma pull, neutrons from the sun smash things everywhere, and you end up with another form of carbon, C14. But like any isotope, it's always going to revert back to its original state. So when you die or any living thing, trees, plants included, there's a ratio making up your chemistry that's part C12 and part C14. Now, over time, the C14 is going to diminish, but the C12 will stay constant. So you can work out how much C14 is missing from your guess at what the ratio was back then. And bear
Mm.
in mind, things like volcanic eruptions and all those kinds of things, they totally throw out the ratios. So like if we're saying 40,000 years because of the difference between C12 and C14, they're guessing what the ratio was 40,000 years ago. So the whole system's flawed to begin with. But in the case of Indigenous Australians, when they've entered AMS, it's a machine that actually measures the decay of the isotope in real time. So this pushed dating from 40,000 years to 48,000 years. A lot of artifacts were retested and they all came up 48,000 years. So there is, the only reason they say that's how long they've been here is because that's the maximum that we can date. There is a
That's the
growing.
measuring stick we have. Is there any significant impacts from the extra 8,000 years, or just we know that the date of arrival was much earlier than we thought?
If you, when you talk to them, they'll tell you they've been here forever. And there is a growing theory, it's quite small and contained, out of Australia theory, which is competing against the out of Africa theory, that Australia was the birth. Because if we look at as we are today, anatomically Homo sapiens sapien, we first appear in the archaeological record approximately 80 to 120,000 years ago in Europe, northern France area, cohabiting with Homo neanderthalensis. Now, there's this chain that they call the theory of evolution, going back to Olduvai Gorge, South Africa. Hominids, most famous, of course, is called Lucy, which is from Australopithecus afarensis from the Leakeys. In my opinion, just an ape, but they have this series of connections from the early Pithecines through Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthalensis, early Cro-Magnon, and Homo sapien. And people are familiar with the term the missing link. The reality is that there is no link between any of these species in the archaeological record. It's all assumed. And Darwin was quite well connected, and he got his theory pushed through as the predominant theory that's still taught today. But the reality is these are all separate species. We anatomically, as we are today, first appear in the archaeological record 80 to 120,000 years ago in Europe. Now, in Australia also, there was a testing. There's an American anthropologist called Alan Thorne who came up with a technique called thermoluminescent dating. Now, the sand in Australia, we have that yellow bricklayer sand and the white plasterer's sand in abundance. And this sand has a high quartz content. And quartz stores energy from sunlight. So this technique, thermoluminescence dating, like if you have some quartz in the sun, it gets charged, and then you take it out of the sun, it's going to lose its charge over time. So they can date how long this quartz lasts or sunlight. And then what you do is if you come across an artifact that you want to date, if it's in a particular stratigraphic layer, which is, if you look at a riverbank that's lost water over time, you can see stripes in the side. This is called stratigraphy, and this is used as a geological method for dating non-organic matter. So if you have a stone tool or something, it's in a particular layer. If you follow that layer into darkness and take some out, so that quartz has not seen sunlight since it was on the top type thing, you can date how long ago that is. Now, you may have worked out from that there's a lot of things that can go wrong, like rabbits burrowing holes or all kinds of stuff that could disrupt that. So it's not widely accepted, but it is gaining momentum. And this pushes dating from 60 to 75,000 years. And there are artifacts in the southwest of Australia, a place called Augusta, and along the northwestern coast, where the people used to trade with the Maxims of Indonesia. And we've got dates there of 70. No, again, the maximum we can date to, we have artifacts that are going to that date. So if we're looking at Australians, we're here 80,000 years ago, which is when we conservatively, 80 to 120,000 years ago, appear in the archaeological record in Europe, and there's nothing in between at this point. It's yeah, the story just doesn't make sense. And another part of
So,
the story,
so
sorry, go ahead.
just to sum up, I just want to make sure I'm capturing this. As you're working in the field of archaeology, you're practicing, and the state of knowledge is changing. I think you had mentioned kind of like an archaeological or a history mafia. So there is a preferred prevailing narrative that everything needs to fit into a story, the preferred story.
Exactly.
And
And
you're noticing
something
that
which
there's a divergence between actuality and the preferred narrative.
more like a chasm.
Okay. All right. Continue.
Yeah. One thing that really got me, I was working, there's a small island off the coast of Perth called Rottnest Island. And I worked on a project out there with the local custodians, the Noongar. And the elder that I was working with, and this is like 2004, 2005, no, 2004, and maybe 2005. He was in his 50s at the time. And because of my own personal philosophy, interests, asked a lot of questions, we developed a pretty good friendship while we were working on this project. And the project, by the way, was um, following up on their own stories. The town of Fremantle was built with stone quarried on Rottnest Island. And what they would do, they would just round up all the Aboriginal people, put them on boats, make them row out to Rottnest Island, and they would quarry stone during the day. And then at night time, they would just tie them up around a tree, or chain them up around trees. During the winter, a lot of them would froze to death. So they just basically buried them in pits. And this has been their custodial storyline that doesn't fit with history, but they got approval from a council to do this. So we did some GPR work, ground penetrating radar. We didn't dig anywhere here, just purely radar. And there were significant anomalies we detected to say, yes, these are burial pits. And so a whole section of that island was sealed off. In fact, I'm the last, the Noongar word is Wodjala. Wodjala is white person. I'm the last white person to have walked on that land. It's now sealed for custodial use only. But this elder I was working with, so he was in his 50s. He told me some stories that his grandmother told him when he was a boy. And here's the killer. She was alive when the British first arrived in Australia. So when you read about history, you think numbers, 50, 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000. It's all very right brain stuff. But you're thinking this is 3 generations yesterday. His grandmother was alive when the British first arrived, and she told him stories when he was a boy. Their history is so different to what we get taught in school. It was essentially just a massacre and a land grab. But yeah, so again, the stories are so different. And that really made me realize the opportunity that I had. If you go anywhere else in the world where you're looking at the colonial empires invading and taking over countries, you're talking like 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. And in Europe, to 5,000 years, China 5,000 years. And here's an opportunity to find out about first contact from 3 generations ago. So that's when I really started working closer with the Noongar people and understanding their history, their tradition. And you realize that everything you get taught, primary school, high school, university, it's just a lie. And if they can lie about that, what else can they lie about? And so my main interest personally of research for the last probably 8 or 9 years has been Tartaria. And I'm always open. My ideas have evolved and changed, or maybe devolved, I don't know, but they're definitely changed over the years. So I'm open to new things all the time. But at the moment, I'm pretty convinced of the fact that something happened 300 years ago, and we went from a global unified civilization with free energy, the architecture of which is obvious all around the world, with cathedrals, the Gothic style or the Neo-Roman style. If you look at these structures in Europe, Rome, Greece, they're all obliterated. But you look at them in, say, the United States, and they're fully intact. And there's examples around the world where they're in complete ruins, and others where they're intact. Including we have cathedrals like St Mary's in Sydney that when you look at the timeline for that to be built and the resources available to them, it's absolutely impossible. No, they didn't come across
So
with
is what you're
stonemasons.
describing more megalithic structures, like just huge, massive, complex buildings?
In some cases, yes, which I believe that those actually go back to a previous reset. But the most recent reset from 300 years ago are the cathedrals that you see all around the world. The buildings like the US Capitol, the dome, the spires, the minuets on top, you see those in every single country all over the world. And like trees, when British first arrived in Australia, the only thing you can do with trees in Australia is firewood. Like, you can't build with them, right? There's no hardwood. Um, and then the stone alone of the size of these cathedrals, it doesn't fit into the time zone. And you can't say in Australia, you can't say, oh, it was the Romans, it was the Greeks. There's nothing to fall back on, yet those buildings exist. So 300 years ago, something happened. A lot of, like anything, there's a lot of theories, whether it was a plasma event from the sun or some natural catastrophe, or whether it was a war with advanced weapons. But something happened 300 years ago. We were completely reset. And as the colonial powers spread out across the realm, trying to explore, as we're told, like Columbus and so forth, these cities in America, for example, they were already there. They were founded rather than built, and they just repopulated from scratch as little as 300 years ago. And if you think of your own ancestry, like, what do we really know beyond our own grandparents? Everything that we know has been provided to us. The education system, especially since the late 1950s, has been controlled by one family. You have to when you accept everything that you're told, you don't question it. It all makes sense. But the moment that you start to look at it, the moment you start to ask questions, it just collapses in front of your eyes. It actually makes no sense. It makes zero sense. But we've been brought up in a way that we don't ask questions. My report cards when I was in school was, Robert is a disruptive influence in class, because we used to ask questions that the teachers didn't have the answers to. So we're brought up in this way that it's wrong to rock the boat. Don't ask questions. Shut up. Do what you're told. Pay your taxes, and we'll leave you alone. And a lot of people are happy in that space, but I've never been happy in that space.
So, what led you to trade a former British colony and then relocate to a former Spanish colony?
The pandemic. Um, so, for example, and I was actually working in Perth on a different job on a colonial period cemetery that had been gone into disarray. And I was working on that, and I was flying backwards and forwards every 2 weeks. And I remember in Perth watching that clip of that Chinese guy just falling forward, but still manages to put his hands out before he hits the ground. And that clip just went viral on all the news networks as the introduction to the pandemic. Um, and when they put me on a flight back to Melbourne, because it was 2 and 2, when I left Perth, everything was normal. When I landed in Melbourne, everyone's wearing plastic masks, face shields, gloves. I'm thinking, whoa, what, you know, and it just got progressively worse from there. As an indication, where we were, we had a 5 kilometer radius from your house where you're allowed to go food shopping once a day. And the only places that you could do that were the two main chains, which in Australia is Coles and Woolworths. Your local little corner store, they weren't allowed to open. So you go down to do your shopping that you're allowed to go out once a week. You get to the shopping centre and it's just tanks of police and they're checking everyone's ID. Firstly, to make sure you haven't travelled more than 5 kilometres. And secondly, to record your name. So if you try and go a second time, then you get busted. During this period, it was an arrestable offence to not carry photo ID because no, they had to check how far you travelled. We had a 9 p.m. curfew, and the violence that the police got away with completely against protesters. There's a great clip you can find on YouTube. If you Google something like 78-year-old woman pandemic police, something like that, there's this clip that this 78-year-old woman, she's pushed down to the ground by a police officer who then sprays mace in her face at point blank, walks off, and then the next two police officers behind him also bend over and spray her in the face, point blank range. People were being arrested for Facebook posts questioning the narrative. But yeah, the anti-terrorist force was used against protesters in the city of Melbourne. They had armoured vehicles going out. They were shooting protesters. And of course, in the news, it's always, the right-wing extremist, Nazi, blah, blah, blah. But it was families. It was children. It was elderly people protesting the fact that they can't work. They're losing their businesses. And the police opened fired on them with rubber bullets. First time in
And
Australian
so,
history that.
so my question is this why you dove into Splinterlands to like avoid this like hellscape reality of the COVID times?
Um, I did get a lot more active online activities. I couldn't work for a year. Um, basically, I had to sell a Bitcoin to live for a year. I wasn't allowed to work because I didn't want to drink the apple juice that they were giving out for free.
Mhm.
And as soon as I was able to leave the country, because at this point I'm just looking at my savings going down. I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to be living off my savings, it's better to be living somewhere that's costing a lot less, because the
Cheaper
cost
for
of living
sure.
in Australia has just become ridiculous. Like from 2019 to 2023 when I left, my weekly food shopping had like quadrupled, went from like 50 to nearly 200. Petrol had doubled. Utilities like electricity, gas, water was up like 30%. It was just getting ridiculous. So I'm a huge fan of voting with my feet. Like, if I don't get good service somewhere, or I don't want to be, I'm not a Karen. I'm not going to go up and just whinge and complain. Just okay, I just won't come back here again. I just too much energy lost and complaining or whining when you don't even know if it's going to have a result. So yeah, huge
When
fan.
you talk about these like epic 48,000 year histories, and then I think sometimes of the times that we are in currently, and I'm just like what will our archaeologists see? Or like just be like piles of trash and plastic and rusty metal skyscraper beams, like it's like our history is just going to be twisted and rusty.
Well, that's an interesting thing with all the rock structures that we see. Our cities, like steel beams, iron, 1,000 years, it's dust. It's just a stain in the sand. It doesn't last. So there would be no evidence. 5,000. Let's say the same dating. 40,000 years into the future, probably the only thing that's going to remain of us is plastic.
Plastic.
I wonder if some of the Roman concrete will still be there. That seems to have been
No,
remarkably
no
resilient.
reason, no reason it wouldn't be. No reason it wouldn't be. Yeah,
So
stone.
if we let's go a little bit into the past here, because you mentioned D Daily. I loved that group. That was a big reason that I stuck around here in Hive. I loved the chatting and the challenging and everybody kind of sharing information about video making. Definitely, I I miss that scene, to be perfectly honest. I wish it still some scene like that still existed, of just kind of this commitment to just trying to put things out on the regular. Um, but I'm curious, like going through, like what I remember the D files. That was one I listened to. It was like what that
Sam,
guy EFT
yeah,
guy.
Sam. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Sam.
EFT
Okay.
now. EFT
Yeah.
now. Is it? Yeah.
And then I think I was like on one of your early shows called Meet the Steamians when we were back in
Yep.
that Steam days. Like, so like you're uniquely positioned to talk about the history of podcasting here on Hive. What is the state of podcasting now on Hive compared to the Steam days, and what is your trajectory, and what are your thoughts on future podcasting here on Hive?
One thing I've noted and mentioned a couple of times on my podcast too, my focus is Hive. I publish on Free Speak. I want to and especially with Splinterlands, it's a very niche market. But I do mirror on YouTube. Um, and I find a lot of the Splinterlands players are commenting on the YouTube channel, not on Hive. I've often I'll even reply to their YouTube message. They're like, "Why aren't you commenting on Hive? Like, I will upvote you. Matt will upvote you. You could get like $1 worth in upvotes simply by commenting on our post." And as a Splinterlands player, they automatically have a Hive account. It's not like you've got to get them into Hive. If you've got a Splinterlands account, you automatically have a Hive account and a wallet. Use it, utilize it. But it's falling on deaf ears, and I don't understand the disconnect there. Um, and I guess there is a mixed market in Splinterlands. Some people have come from a crypto background; they would understand. They're probably the people who are using my Hive posts to comment and so forth. But the other side of Splinterlands, they've come from card collectibles like Gathering the Magic the Gathering, or you know, I never really got into those, so I can't even think of other ones. But those types of games. So maybe the adoption to crypto is still confusing for them, and it's a lot easier now. Getting back to before when I was saying about my friend who introduced me, and I didn't even have an account before he went back to Mexico, he did come down to visit, and he helped me create a couple of accounts. I think at the time it was BTC Markets, which had gone now, and the other one was Binance. And he showed me how to like do a transaction type thing, and off he went. And then tried to do it by myself. I couldn't. Like I would open up the exchange page, which a lot of the interfaces are much more friendly now. But back then it was just like a DOS screen, and there's just a sell column, a buy column, and there's numbers everywhere, and it was so overwhelming for someone who had no idea what was going on. That the first couple of transactions we had to like do a Zoom meeting and screen share for it. Take me through step by step to sell some. Um, I think it was at this point it was like, yeah, it was still Steam. So like, but being able to learn my way around exchanges. So maybe that's still a barrier for a lot of people. Um, but yeah, it's a hard room to move from YouTube to Hive, considering they've already got a Hive account. I really don't
Well,
understand the
and
disconnect.
there's the other factor, and we were talking about it in person of just even you're talking about old Steam days and the usability of the tools and just like things go wrong. So why are people fucking works? Like I mean, things often break on Hive, so you have to be a certain type of person that like is willing to sort of muddle through. Like, oh, three speak is down for a month.
Splinterlands does have its own kind of unique thing, and maybe you can talk to this, Boba Fett. In some ways, it's a part of Hive, but in some ways, it's also kind of like its own island, and it has its own culture and things going on that don't necessarily percolate back out to Hive sometimes.
Absolutely. I think of Hive as, remember the old school Lego blocks, which were literally just blocks. You didn't have people and cars pre-made, like, and you'd start off with the base foundation of just a big flat square or rectangle of the Lego bumps, and then you would start putting your bricks on that to build something. I see that flat piece of Lego as Hive. And then all of the dApps that have come along and run on Hive, they're like Lego blocks that someone's just plugged onto that. And this speaks to the versatility of it, 3-second transaction time, no fees. I think the only reason that Hive isn't as popular as it is just because no one knows about it. I mean, if you were using something that's costing you every time you make a transaction, imagine playing a game on a platform that every transaction is a cost involved. Um, Hive is the perfect solution, and there's even groups and within Hive that, and Splinterlands too. If their CEO Yavapi Matt has often said in town hall meetings, like, if you've building a dApp and you're having trouble integrating it, we've got a team. Reach out. We'll help you integrate that into the blockchain. So we've got this incredible platform that people can just plug into. I think the only reason we're where we are at the moment, and we were down 10 cents or something the other day, and with all of the social media policing coming around the Commonwealth countries, digital IDs, in Australia, no social media for under 16s after 10th of December. You'd think people are looking, and we've got what they're looking for. Just no one knows. No one knows. And I remember listening in on one of the witness meetings, and Starkers was making a thing of the fact that we've got all of this going on, we've got all these projects, but we've we've got no marketing. Our marketing completely sucks. Um, we've got what everyone's going to be looking for with this centralized policing now of all of the mainstream networks. We've just got to let them know that we're here and we can do we have what they're looking for, in my opinion.
Messaging, yeah. Which kind of brings us to Hive outreach. Some of the discussions we were having while you were here in person, and just well, the you know it's it's difficult to pitch people on a tool sometimes, that when the first time you're showing them it, like we had some issues with Distriator while you were here, and um I don't know, like it's tricky to like get things debuggied. And so then it's, I'm always looking for like, well, what is the easiest way in? What's the way to immediately get people to be able to feel comfortable and use a tool or use some aspect. Uh, I've really been into this powered by Hive thing, that like it doesn't have to necessarily be in your face that you're using Hive. Um, but the underneath is what's powered by Hive. And that maybe, I don't know, I think that's a little bit what VSC is trying to do as well to some extent.
Yeah, my big takeaway from the thing was the fact that was it 7 times I paid with Hive, only once did Distriator work. It half worked. Right, once it actually made the post, but I got error messages and there was no money, and then I had to contact someone, one of the devs in the channel, and that was what, a week ago now, sort of that. So, but paying with Hive, paying with HBD, smooth as, perfect, instant, fantastic. Distriator, in my takeaway is when I'm going back to Cusco, by the way, at the end of December, probably around the 20th. I haven't booked my flights yet, but about the 20th, I'm going back to Cusco. And my takeaway was, just don't mention Distributor. Just show them what works, show them what's easy. Because when you're introducing to someone and it just fail, it's like you've lost everything. You haven't just lost the Distriator cashback, you've lost the interest in Hive, because they don't know the difference between Hive and Distriator. They just see failed transaction. And then, for the 20% cashback up, for small purchases, no one mentioned that there was a limit to me when I was promoting it, but as I just think the opportunity to pay with Hive, um, and the hard sell over here, and Buckcoins you might relate, that there's no real savings ideology in Latin culture. Like it's, if they make some Hive, it's like, okay, how can I get this out? How can I spend it?
Mhm.
Convincing people to
True.
hold on to something, like money wise, and just like invest it, let it get some interest, or keep it as an emergency. It's just not part of the culture here. So that's the hard sell. Why? I mean, if you could offer them US dollars rather than their local currency, they'd take the US dollars straight away. But we're offering them something that's pegged to the US dollar. But again, it's like, why do I want to hold on to money when I can spend it? That's the hard sell here. What do you think
It is.
on
It is
that?
definitely like it's like they want to prove it immediately, which is good if if there is the vehicle to prove that you can pull it out immediately. I love here in our town, you can like make some money on Hive, use V for V, and then take it to the ATM and then withdraw Quetzales. That's kind of a neat full circle that we have in here in the town I live in, Guatemala. But I think you're uniquely positioned, and we are wrapping up on the hour. But I am interested your point of view, because you saw two lenses, and maybe you have some ideas yourself. But when you went to Talentland, that was like a blast of like onboarding. Whole groups of people would all come on board, and I'm curious your thoughts on short term mass onboarding versus like something like what we're doing here with Hive Hub, what we're trying to do, like sustain, or you could say the Polish. I always I struggle with their name, Krasnolawal or something, or that the place that's in Poland, where they have like a castle, and they're doing like a long-term outreach and onboarding initiative. What's your take on the two, like short-term versus long-term outreach and onboarding?
This is actually the exact scenario that I'm going through with the hostel I want to help in Ogiente Tambo, in that, but because the plan is to when things start to live there for 3 months, I mentioned briefly while I was there, but in that time, I don't want to be going around all of town, all of the merchants, trying to get them on board, and then at some point I have to leave. So I leave, and everyone's coming across from, well, what do I do? What do I do? And of course, what do you do when you don't know what to do? You do nothing. I would rather invest all my time into one person or one or two people to make sure that they are capable of fixing any problems after I've left before even starting to look for other businesses. And if they are a hub, we could begin by okay, maybe initially set a limit. So for example, in Peru, it would be soles. It could be like 200 sole maximum. So if you go in, you've got some HBD, you can cash it in at the hostel for local currency, or vice versa. If you want some HBD, you can go give them the money. And then initially sourcing through the hostel tours, guides, places, restaurants, and so forth, where the guest would actually pay the hostel, and then the hostel would pay the tour guide, the place, or whatever in the local currency. This then gives you a period of time to have KPIs with each of the merchants and say, hey, look, all of this stuff that we've been buying from you with soles, look how much business we've given you. Now imagine if you could be getting US dollars for that you can keep and hold on to. So that's the approach. I want to just train one or two people extremely well, rather than just get 100 people on, or even let's be, okay, 20. Get 20 people on board who all know a tiny little bit, who can't help each other after I leave. So long term, I want to invest in just one or two people.
Yeah, sounds like an effective way, for sure. I wish you luck going back there, if that is the case. That is that way your plan is now? You're going to go back there for like a longer term period of time, or how long would you go back to Peru for?
I'm just going for 2 weeks in December. Um, I when I, this is when I came back to Guadalajara. It's the first time I've landed first in Guadalajara and had to clear immigration and customs. Usually, a flight lands in Mexico City. I do it all there, and then I get a local flight from Mexico City to Guadalajara. Every time I've come back in, I automatically get 180 days stamped on my passport, which is the maximum. For whatever reason, whether it was because it was Guadalajara or whether my immigration officer was just having a bad day, I got 45 days.
Oh no.
So yeah, so I figured let's if I have to leave, I don't want to just do another trip to another country's airport and back again. I've done that before. And the timing is, so the 26th is time up. So I'm thinking if I leave on the 20th, I'll have Christmas and New Year's Eve in Cusco. That would be like amazing. So
Oh,
I'm just going
nice.
to go for 2 weeks purely as a holiday. And this time I'm not even going to take my laptop with me. Traveling is, because when I travel, I don't use checks. I just have my carry-on suitcase and a backpack, which has got my laptop in it. It's such a pain traveling with a laptop when you're going through. You've got to take it out of your bags, got to scan separately, and all sorts of stuff that goes on. This time for 2 weeks, I'm not even taking my laptop with me. But the long term that I was talking about before is going to be in March. Again, plans change, but you've got to be heading in a direction. At the moment, I'm looking at March to go and actually live in Ollantaytambo for 3 months. Um, Everywhere that I've
Nice.
been, and I've traveled extensively around Southeast Asia. I've been to a few countries over here. The town of Ollantaytambo it's about 2 hour bus trip from Cusco on a collectivo. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Um,
Oh,
so
nice.
yeah, just to live there for 3 months would be
Well,
amazing.
aloha, Ed. Do you have any questions that you're dying to ask Boba Fett before we get this day on the road?
Well, we probably should start wrapping it up, but at some point, I was thinking about the way we sell Hive, and a lot of the content you come over, and it's almost esoteric in a way because you already have to know something about Hive to understand it, and so I kind of like the idea of the archaeological content, even if it's something that may be um, salacious to some with like references to Tartaria and stuff because people are interested in that kind of content. They can just hop on Hive and read it just like a regular web page. And so I think we probably underappreciate the way Hive can be leveraged to as a censorship vector for I don't I I don't mean to sound dismissive when I use the word niche, but segmented type of content about very specific interest, and then you can just point people. And I think the discovery mechanism is the big point. But I think writing things, creating content or videos for people that aren't on Hive is kind of an interesting option. And just the final note before I shut up and let you do the outro, it would be fun to circle back around with Boba Fett at some point in the future and do another kind of like a focus segment on some of the alternative archaeology or alternative historical theories.
I'm
For
down.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's been amazing, Boba Fett. I thank you for coming and giving us a little bit of your insights into Hive and archaeology and the history of Australia and how man, little did I know I'm rooted from Australia and possibly. So that's pretty cool information to learn today. So thank you for that as well. Um, it was I a few weeks ago, or I guess it was week, you did your 200th episode here, and I got to sit in on a bit of a Splinterlands podcast. You could call it like a dork fest, but it was awesome. It was like really fun. Like everybody was dorking out on Splinterlands. I got to kind of be a little fly on the wall. I don't play Splinterlands, but I did get a pack of Steam monsters at the 2017 or 2018 Hive Fest. So I still have that unopened pack. So maybe someday I'll strike the jackpot there. But anyways, it has been wonderful chatting with you today. Thank you, Aloha Ed, for coming and bringing your soothing voice and wonderful questions. And thanks, Baba.
Thank you.
All right, and that's a wrap for today. And we, people out there in the audience have any like want to jump